Okay, so this is just a quick review going over the two things that are on our quiz for Unit 3. The first part is slope. So let's see, remember slope formula. Remember, slope is rise over run, meaning, right, it's the change in y values divided by the change in the x values. And again, this formula is on your formula chart, right? So I'm just going to put that up there. Let me box that. There we go. And so remember, you need to be able to identify slope from a graph, from a table, from two given points, and from a word problem. So we're just going to go through a few of those examples, okay? So the first one is slope from a graph, right? So clearly this is an increasing line, so you know it has a positive slope, right? Let me just give myself a blank. And I've given you a series of points that lie on the line. So you just basically need to analyze the rise over run, right? So clearly we're rising 2, which is a positive movement, and then running 3, which is another positive movement. And you can see that stays constant, which is why slope is also known as the constant rate of change, right? Because we're going up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3. So the up 2 is the change in y, and the right 3 is the change in the x, right? Which makes our slope just a nice, easy 2/3. Right? Up 2, right 3. All right, the next one is given 2 points. So clearly we want to use that slope formula, right? So y2 minus y1. Remember, so I'm going to scooch that down a little bit. Remember, you can start with either point. It doesn't have to be the second y necessarily, right? But I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do y2, and then I'm going to subtract the y1. So in my numerator, that's going to give me 3 minus 3. And then in the denominator, I'm going to get, I have to start with the negative 4. There we go. And that would give me negative 4 minus 5. And then you can either type that all into a calculator or just simplify the numerator and denominator by yourself. Obviously, 3 minus 3 gives me 0, and negative 4 minus 5 is negative 9. Not that I really care what's in the denominator, because 0 divided by anything is 0. So that would be our final slope. If you don't remember your rules about dividing with zeros, please use your calculator. Right? Remember, 0 divided by any number is 0, but any number divided by 0 is an undefined slope, right? Because division by 0 is undefined. All right, this third example, excuse me, it's basically the exact same example, except it's written in function notation. We talked about this in our notes. So remember, this is just written in function notation, which is f of x equals y. So it's just a fun little way of telling you what the x and the y value are without writing it as a point, right? And so f of 4 equals 2 just simply means they're referring to the point 4, 2. It's really just that simple, right? And then over here, for this f of x equals y, again, they're just telling us that when the x value is 6, the y value is negative 4. So they're telling us that the point 6, negative 4 lies on the line. And you'll notice then we're just right back to the problem that we just did a second ago, right? It's just a function notation way of writing an ordered pair, so no big deal. So we're just going to go ahead and use that slope formula. Again, y2 minus y1. I like to do my arrows just so I remember which way I subtracted. Please make sure you did the y's on the top, right? It's rise over run, right? So we need the y's on the top. Rise and y's, it rhymes, right? So negative 4 minus 2 on the numerator. And then we're going to do positive 6 minus 4 in the denominator. And then we just need to clean that up. You can type that all into your calculator at once, or you can simplify it again individually. Negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. 6 minus 4 is 2. And negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Or negative 3 over 1, right? It would be perfectly fine as well. All right, slope from a table. So remember, if you want to, these are just coordinates, so you can just pick two of them if you want, and you're right back to what we just did on the previous two problems. Or what I really like to do on tables is not to have to do the slope formula, because remember how we did in class, we just analyzed the table and we asked ourselves, what did we do to get from -4 to -1? Well, it looks like I added 3. So that's the change in y's. And then notice it's doing that all the way down, right? I added 3, then I added another 3, right? So that plus 3 with the change in y's, that's staying consistent all the way down. And then for my x's, right, from 0 to 2, we added 2. And notice that's also staying consistent all the way down, which means our slope being the change in y, which is adding 3, and the change in x's, which is adding 2, that makes our slope 3/2. Right, change in y's over change in x's. All right, and then lastly, from a story problem, Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch pails of water. Working at a constant rate, they collected 14 pails after 2 hours and 26 pails after 5 hours. So notice this problem did not mention the keywords each, every, of, per, right? Which would imply they just are giving us the slope, right? But they are giving us 2 points of data, right? So they're telling us that they collected 14 pails after 2 hours. Now that is going to be the coordinate 2, 14. Please remember, time is always going to be your independent variable. Now, not every problem is going to involve time, right? But if it does, it needs to be the x. Please do not make the assumption that because the 14 is written first and the 2 is written second, that it's the ordered pair 14, 2, because it is not, right? We have to pay close attention to which one is the dependent variable, right? The number of pails they collect depends on how long they are working, right? And so we want the pails to be the y and the time to be the x, okay? And then that means that our second point, if they collected 26 pails after 5 hours, then that means our second point is 5, 26. Again, I know the 5 has to go first because he is referring to time, and time is always the x. Okay, so just be careful. And yeah, once you've got that down, then you're literally right back to every single question we just did, right? Given 2 points, we should be able to find the slope. So here we go. The slope is the change in y over change in x. So 26 minus 14 would be our change in y, and then 5 minus 2 would be our change in x. Right? And then simplifying that, 26 minus 14 is 12, and 5 minus 2 is 3. So that gives us a slope of 4, or 4 over 1 if you want to write it like that. The other thing you should be able to do once you have, especially with a word problem, once you have identified the slope, you should be able to interpret what that slope of 4 means in context of the problem. And for this case, that would mean the number, I'm just going to the number of pails increases by, remember we need that phrase in there, whether it's increasing or decreasing, right? The number of pails increases by 4 every 1 hour, right? So we're getting the 4 in there, we're getting the 1, which is the denominator, right? And so that would be our interpretation. Okay. All right. The very last thing I just want to talk about really quick is point slope form. Right. You guys are really great at this. Remember, point slope form, you don't have to memorize the formula, but you do have to know when and how to use it. So obviously, remember, it's called point slope form because we use it when we know a point and a slope. Right. If you don't know a point and a slope of the line, then this is not the form for you. All right. So here we go. Remember, point slope form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And then you just have to plug in the numbers for the y1, the m, and the x1, right? Please remember this x and this y, they stay x and y to represent all the independent and dependent variables on the line. Okay, and so here we go. So let's see. Actually, you know what? I'm going to color code this really quick just so I don't lose anybody. Right, so here's my y. And then, of course, here's the m. Right, that's our slope. And then our x1 is this guy, right? So little color coding just so we know exactly where to plop these numbers. All right, so here we go. So y minus, and then our y value and our coordinate is 5. Our slope is 1/3. And then in parentheses, x minus the x coordinate, which is -2. So remember, x minus -2, well, that's just going to turn into one big plus sign because a double negative, so I'm just going to erase it, right, would make that a plus. And that's the only way, right? A formula that only has minus signs can then turn into a formula that has plus signs as if you're plugging a negative behind the plus sign, making the double negative, okay? And that's it. That's all you got to do, right? Point slope form, just plugging it in. All right, and then, so on your quiz, there'll be a few problems like that, right? You also might have, instead of me just giving you the point and the slope, you might have questions from tables and 2 points, and basically all these questions we did up here with slope, you should now be able to take all of them to point slope form, right? All right, so the last question is going backwards. If I give you the point slope form, can you identify the point and the slope, and then can you graph the line? Right, and so remember, I'm just going to write above here, right, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. I'm just going to kind of write that above it so we can kind of see, right? We can clearly see the slope is 4. That's a nice, easy one to point out. All right, so the slope is 4, or 4/1. Sorry, I'm going to clean this up a little bit. Give me one sec. Scooch that down. There we go. So the slope is 4. I'm going to write or 4/1, which is actually going to help me graph in just a second. And then we need the point, right? So the point is the x1, y1, right? So let's see. If I just kind of work from left to right, I can clearly see that it's still a minus sign over here on the left, which means we plugged in a positive 3 for the y value. And then over here, right, our x1 value made the equation turn into a positive 6. And remember, we just had this conversation. The only way that can happen is if we plugged a negative 6 in behind the minus sign in the formula, right? That's the only way we're getting that plus sign. So that's the point that lies on the line. And now that we have those two pieces of information, we can totally graph what this line looks like, right? I know it has to pass through the point -6, 3. Oh my goodness gracious. Hold on just a second. I don't know how my graph got off track. There we go. So -6, 3. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -6, 1, 2, 3. So left 6, up 3. And then it has a slope of 4. Remember, slope is always a fraction, though. So I like to think of it as 4/1 because that means I'm going to rise 4, run 1. Right? And I can do it again if I want. Rise 4/1. Right? Or I could go down 4, left 1. Right? I can move any direction I really want to there, as long as it's consistent with a slope of a positive 4/1. Let me redo that one. That line doesn't look very... There we go, better. All right, and that would be our line. All right, so again, just a quick little review. You will get to use the formula chart that has those formulas on it, so they don't have to be memorized, but you just need to know how to use them, okay? All right, see you guys in class.